I'll go to edit something and it's like, this is so good, this part of it, but I do have to take it out because it's adding complexity to the narrative now, and the narrative has to come first.
I think you should have it in a way when people are just taste testing or checking you out for the first time, you've got to make it super digestible. And the Seinfeld versus Game of Thrones analogy is,
It's interesting to see the way they talk about you.
Yep.
Because they haven't met you.
Yeah.
And they talk about you as if they know you.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
so,
that's interesting.
So this has given me an interesting insight into that because they're people I know.
There's an analogy around the Lord of the Rings. There's like the books that are super complex and very detailed. And if you were to translate that exactly to the movie, it would be a drone and it would be too much. And I remember there was an interview with Peter Jackson who directed it, and he was saying, I had to cut out really important pieces. But then even with all those missing pieces, he's like, I had to still make a very good narrative. So I'm missing characters, I'm missing plot points.
It's great, and you do have to just put yourself out there in a way, and you have to explain things that don't have every single caveat covered because it's too hard to consume, basically. Yes. So that's something too, is it feels like you're opening yourself up to criticism. Hello, Alex. How you doing?
Good, Jack. How are you?
I'm good. We're on a podcast. We're podcasting.
Yep.
And we've done this 22 times now. This is the 22nd time we've done this for this season.
Yep, back to back. We haven't stopped in the last week. Yep.
No, we've been doing it just flat out all the time. So we thought we'd talk about it.
Yep.
22 episodes. We're at the stage where that's enough. Enough mud thrown at the wall that we can take a few lessons away from how it's been. The push was a podcast before this season, which did about 50 episodes or so, but it was strictly an interview podcast back then, where I'd have guests on and interview them. They'd tell their story. Now it's more of a collaborative thing that you and I do, where we talk about marketing and sales and share marketing and sales stories and try to have a lot of fun along the way. And grow a brand, and test things out. And
I think it's very meta too, right? Like we're a lot of lessons learned we share on here, and hopefully that helps others. But this episode's sort of like using this as a marketing lesson learned and what to gain from it, and taking our own advice, right? Like we're trying to use as an experiment to try some things, explore, see if it works, see if it doesn't work.
Yes, I agree. That's
very Inception.
Yes, get ready for Inception, my friends, on the other end of the camera there, or the other end of the TV screen, or
signal.
the desktop, or the mobile.
Yeah.
So, I'll kick off if you like about some of the things I've learned from 22 episodes. I have learned. What have I learned? One thing that's been really interesting is around parasocial relationships. So. Parasocial relationships being that if you know of someone, if you consume someone's content, and then that they don't know who you are, basically. So you feel like you have a relationship with them, kind of, but they don't know you exist. And naturally, people who know me listen to this podcast, but I have then talked to them in person, and I've heard people say stuff like, "Oh, I saw what Alex posted the other day; it was great," or they talk about you as if they know you.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, how do you know Alex?
Yeah.
I do a podcast with him.
Yeah.
And they're like, yeah, I know. That's how I know him.
That's so interesting.
But it's interesting to see the way they talk about you.
Yep.
Because they haven't met you.
Yeah.
And they talk about you as if they know you.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's interesting.
So this has given me an interesting insight into that because they're people I know.
Yep.
So,
and do you think it's a transfer of trust though? Because obviously the relationship started with you. They trust you. They know you, and it's like, oh, Jack knows this guy. I've seen him a couple times. Therefore, I feel like I know him and trust. Hopefully, they trust me. But at least they know who I am.
Yeah, I think that's what gets them in the door. But I think that they probably just consume a lot of what you say and then feel like they know you.
Interesting.
And probably video plays a big role in that. I'd imagine.
Yep.
Just seeing someone.
Yeah, and frequency, that many times, not just like one thing they saw. I find it interesting and this is obviously for a much different end of the spectrum, but people talk about celebrities in that same sense too. They come you hear people, hardcore fans, go like, oh, Gary Vaynerchuk did this thing and Gary's more like this. Be like, no, he's not. And you're like, he doesn't know either you two exist. Like he's got nothing to do with you. But probably a frequency and the amount of content they've consumed over time, they feel like they know him off the back of it, which is kind of interesting, right? And it is for him very powerful sort of thing. So yeah, that is interesting. Yeah,
very much a thing of the digital age.
Yeah.
Not that people, there was famous people before, and we're not famous, but
Before us, there was no one else famous.
No, we're the first two famous people on this planet.
Yeah.
This is how you do it.
3 likes an episode.
Yeah. Yes. But just lots of views that people aren't interacting with.
Correct. Yeah, that's right.
So that's interesting, and it, to me, it speaks to the power of podcasting and the power of video as well. Is that someone can consume your content, and I saw them go from not knowing you through to I feel like I know him and I've never met him.
Interesting.
So
that is cool.
I got to see that spectrum. So that would be one thing. And there'd be a lot of people, or there'd be other people out there that are also, you might be listening now, and you might feel like you know us, and we don't know you. So yeah, if you are thinking about doing a podcast, to anyone listening, it is powerful in that way, in that relationship building. It also tends to be, especially the audio in the longer form video episodes. Yeah, it's a long form piece of content that you do have time to feel like you get to know someone and how they think and talk and whatnot.
I agree.
I would also say that it's interesting how the same content can work very differently in different channels. So TikTok's ruthless. We're on TikTok, but ruthless for keeping attention. But those same clips on YouTube Shorts hold attention a lot longer. So,
and I was going to say, for those who don't see us on those channels, we repurpose the short clips across. And being in a marketing lab, media lab, we try it across a bunch of different areas. So YouTube, LinkedIn, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook.
We tried Facebook.
Yeah.
Kind of.
Yeah.
We have an email list and a website
that's right.
as well. So, and then obviously distribution-wise, we're on Spotify and Apple Podcasts and just a range of audio platforms that you're potentially listening to this on. So yeah, like it's interesting to see how the same content on different platforms can perform very differently. It's one thing to know it, it's another thing to feel it and experience it. So that's been a reminder for me, certainly. It's also been quite fun to let a brand evolve and grow. I think that we started this season with hypotheticals of companies that we were trying to tell a story around and build characters and do all this type of thing that just ended up being too complex. And a lot of people don't listen to every episode, so it's hard to build up a character and then have people get attached to that character. And also with our resources and what we have is not, we're not a production studio. We can do what we can do, but we're not, film directors.
Yeah, but I think the power of that is there's a lot of the same as a startup versus a big company, right? I think there's the agility or the agility, right? We can pivot stuff. We can change your idea on the drop of a hat. If you were some larger company and you're like, hey, we're going to change the whole narrative next episode, they'd be like, whoa, can't do that. Like, so I think there's power in that, which is, again, from a learning perspective, really good.
Yeah, sure. You've got that analogy around the Seinfeld versus Game of Thrones idea as well, right? Yeah,
well, that's probably one of the biggest lessons, and it's been a lot of content lessons the last probably 12 months, but it's been having a point where in the early days when I probably have been involved with helping people make podcasts, or at least explore them, and I sort of know what to expect. So like I've really enjoyed this and I've got a lot out of it, and I think it's done some really cool stuff on socials, but I didn't really kid myself to go, hey, doing 20 episodes is going to make us the next Joe Rogan or something ridiculous. Like I was like, okay, there's a lot of work, and then same as a product, it's a lot of iterating and changing and figuring out a way that here is a topic you want to talk about or do. How are you going to deliver that? And I think one of the ones was when you're early on, people don't know you, and people like Joe Rogan can have a 3-hour podcast, and people can listen the whole 3 hours. But if you just started today and you don't have any rapport, people don't know you, they don't trust you, they don't get you yet, you don't have any sway with them, or you can't. They're going to be far less willing to commit to long form. So I think figuring out short form, and not only short form, but like what you're saying with that narrative, you had to follow the narrative from the beginning. Whereas like you should have it. I think you should have it in a way when people are just taste testing or checking you out for the first time. You've got to make it super digestible. And the Seinfeld versus Game of Thrones analogy is with Seinfeld, you can turn on any season, any episode, and within reason, you can pick it up straight away. And it's a plot for that episode. It's so and so. Kramer does this one thing, and it's off and running. Whereas Game of Thrones is you can't watch season 3, episode 4, because then you're gonna know none of the characters. It's not gonna make any sense. So to consume it properly, you got to go from the very beginning, and you've got to watch the narrative. But something like Game of Thrones, who already had a huge following for their book, and first season obviously took off like mad with great characters. Like they did a lot of things right. You can afford to have that, and I think that compounds that success. But I think in the beginning, not always, and I have debates with people on this topic as well, but I think making yourself so insanely easily digestible that anyone at any point can be flicked a 2-minute section of one of these podcasts and hopefully make sense of it and enjoy it, hopefully, and get something out of it.
Yes.
Because I guess I did this one to work with yourself and learn a bit about for this season, but then the second one was to... a lot of the consulting work I do can be very helpful for certain people. So I talk about certain topics or ideas or processes. They go, oh, that's really awesome. I'm going to do that. But then it's like, well, if that can help that person. I wonder if this could help dozens, or if not, hopefully thousands. Like if it gets to enough people, can the same advice or lesson be shared at scale? And I think back to that point, I think it still comes back to the same point over and over again. Focus on quality content beats all. Don't worry about algorithms. Don't worry about... We could put ourselves on 10 more channels if they existed. On Pinterest, right? You could all these things you can put us on, right?
We should be on Pinterest.
A whole flip page of us doing
that's going to catapult our success, I think.
Yeah. But yeah, there's heaps of things you can put us on. You can put it on. But I think it all boils down to because we've seen similar engagement across all our channels for the same clips that did well on LinkedIn did well on TikTok. There was one that I keep calling back, your Officeworks one, which is that it was a really good story. It was a very relatable story, and it painted a very clear visual picture of the story. And it did a highest thing for TikTok. It did quite well on Facebook and Instagram. It did quite well on LinkedIn. And it was I think good content is universal. And I think if you can tell a good story or to say what you need to say well with the right hook, with the right visuals, that triggers something and makes someone feel something. To me, you should spend 99% of your time on that. And that's been another lesson learned on this stuff. There's the whole idea of choosing a quirky company and picking it apart. These ideas, they're fun. But at the end of the day, if what we're saying isn't something people stop and want to listen to, everything else is a waste of time. And
if it's a lot of work to consume, mental work, it was just too much work. And not to confuse people on the same... content worked well on different channels, because I said earlier on that the same content on different channels performed differently.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah. I think just to clarify on that, what you're saying is, that for that channel, it performed well. So,
sorry, you're right.
In the context,
relatively, yes.
Yes, relatively, yes. Yeah. So, in case, people
that's pretty
confused.
Confusing.
Yeah.
So when we saw a spike in LinkedIn, we saw a spike in TikTok.
Yes, for what TikTok is giving us.
Yes, yeah, that's right.
But then YouTube gives us a lot more, and so our spike on YouTube was bigger.
Yes,
you know what I mean.
So more people.
Yeah. It's been, what else would I say? It's just a reminder, because we've brought in video now, and I did a lot of episodes before this over a couple of podcasts, produced maybe 120 episodes of podcast, all audio for the most part. Bringing in video has been awesome, but it has brought in a whole range of variables as well. I was talking about earlier how people feel like they know you, and I'll put some of that down to video. Video brings a lot of work that I wasn't doing before. It's video editing, which is a lot of work. It's we have to set up the room. We have to think about how we're dressed. We have to make sure
camera angles.
Make sure we're not touching our face. And there's a lot of things that go into that. And then just doing the post production for that is a whole another world compared to audio editing. So that's been interesting. I wouldn't do it without the video though. Personally, it's just. Audio podcasting is hard to grow, like on the audio channels, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, this type of thing. Without the video aspect and those social clips that we're doing, I think mentally it'd be a bit harder to keep going with it. You just don't have those wins along the way.
Yeah, I agree.
So videos brought more complexity for sure, but it also has... made it sustainable in the way that it's enjoyable, and we're constantly iterating on what we're doing.
Yep.
and trying new things. And that's a lot of that's video.
Yep. Yeah, 100%. And I think that's the like the effort to do that. I think that's interesting looking at, and we talk about some of the other clips too, even just on the social small clips of stuff, and you think in your head you'll do this one where it's maybe you or I talking to the camera for 40 seconds and you realize the engagement sort of slows down a bit, but having, and maybe it's a detriment to our society now, but having the clip change every couple of seconds and just keep that attention, keep it focused, particularly in the early days when you're still trying to prove yourself and prove that this content is worth consuming, you've got to retain that attention. And I think that's been another lesson learned for me of a lot of people do have a lot of interesting things to say. I think everyone's got a unique perspective and everyone's got great experience and a lot of thing to give. But I think if you can't give it in a way that can easily be listened to or consumed, and also that point about something like 70% of people consume most of their content visually. It's like that's a preferred means. So even if it's just you and I talking, it's more engaging. And I think on the back of that, my lesson learned is making sure that, yes, hopefully the podcast does well. It may or it may not, but I think preparing yourself to go, I'm going to take full control of this, because on the case that, for instance, it doesn't work well, we'll put a lot of effort into this. How can we force an ROI out of this? So one thing I'm a big fan of, like for instance, using some of these episodes that if we talk to clients, they have the same question or they have the same thing they're thinking about. For example, super meta, someone asks us, is it worth making a podcast? Why not listen to this episode? Hopefully we can share some experience. Or, it's like, hey, I'm thinking about hiring an agency. Check this episode out. They may not listen to it, they may listen to it, but at least it hopefully can be reused. And then each episode cut up of, I think we got to a point of like 12 small pieces of sound bites, small clips for one episode. That's a lot of content. If you're posting 3 times a week, that's a month's worth of content. And I think repurposing the heck out of it and just trying to get that attention, trying to build that rapport, and also testing it on those small pieces of content. Some of those ones there, we can test an episode, we might get a handful of downloads, we may never talk to that person. But if I can take that, chop it up, make it visually, and throw it across a bunch of socials and see the reactions, I'm going to get a better gauge of what people listen to, what they don't listen to. And I know I'll bring up that Officeworks one again, because although it was a great story, but we didn't think too hard into it. It was kind of just like, oh, that was like a cool example of brand versus associated brand. But I think...
So Officeworks being the short clip that we made a while ago where I just told a story about buying a laptop bag from Officeworks and it performed better than any of the other clips at the time. And
it was basically, and the whole point was, it was we'll go through the end of it. It was basically you saying you bought a laptop bag from Officeworks, but it wasn't Officeworks brand. So your point was, from a marketing perspective, who deserves the accountability for that, or the credit for that as well? Which, for a couple of reasons. One, it painted a very visual story. You can picture it happening. 2, people have done that before, so it's very relatable. And for an Australian audience, everyone knows Officeworks. And 3, it posed a really interesting question that I think it's kind of funny, because my wife is an accountant and doesn't do any marketing. She was like, that was a great clip. And she goes, I thought about that a lot. And she goes, I had someone liked it who was like her colleague who saw her like it. And it was like, it was that digestible and it was that relatable. And I guess I keep coming back to that point of relatable and digestible and consumable. If you can make it so, like your parents can see it and go like, I get that. But sometimes I think myself, like I'll use a bunch of acronyms of marketing, and a marketer might get it, but 90% of everyone else won't get it. And they don't want to have the effort of Googling what that means. They'll go to the next thing. So making it insanely digestible, insanely relatable, and visual too. I think that's one we've said before of the story should be to a point where you can visualize what's happening. When someone talks about, so Jack walked into the service station the other day and he grabbed the chocolate bar and he went over here, and it's like you can see it happening. And I think that helps put people in the zone as well. Whereas if you're like, the ROI was depleting month on month by 3.2%, you're like, what? That makes no sense. So yeah, I think don't be afraid, not dumbing it down, but just making it very simple to understand.
Yes, which can be a challenge because you feel like you're dumbing it down. You can feel like you're dumbing it down. You're like, no, I know way more than this. But and it's not that the audience is dumb either. That's not what we're saying. It's just, it's cognitive effort.
Yes.
It's reducing that cognitive effort to consume something.
Yep.
And, the best books, the best movies, whatever you consume, you just kind of flowed through it.
Yes.
You didn't get that irritation in your mind. Like, what do they mean here? What do they mean here?
Yeah,
it's not like a textbook or academic journal that only academics read, and me.
It's it's the same that goes, like, even I use the analogy of Amazon, right? Like, even the last couple of years, they're getting better and better, and they're just so good at what they do. But it's like, you see something and they'll pop open something that's probably relatable to you, which probably is, and you like click a button and all of a sudden you purchase it and it's arriving tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so frictionless and so easy to consume, and that's buying something different to consuming something, but it just makes it so nice and easy. It's like, it's hard not to buy stuff. And I think you got to take the same UI UX, same as a website, right? The same mentality to content. It should be effortless to open, read, and be emotionally enjoyable and triggering the entire way through it. And I constantly learn from that all the time.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. You're constantly humbled as well.
Yeah, right.
So,
100%. Yeah. This one will kill it and goes to shit. It gets nothing.
Yeah. And it's a few people do ask me about what, should I start a podcast or is it a good idea? And I want to do it. Sometimes they want to already do it when they come and talk to me. There's a lot in it. There's a lot in, and I've noticed that especially when it comes to video, how much is in it, and just to get it to a point where you're kind of proud of it, and then it might not do much beyond that, because again, audio downloads very difficult to grow, very difficult at the moment. So yeah, you've got all these skills that people don't see in it. Like, hosting is part of it. You've got audio editing, you've got, when it comes to the video clips, you've got copywriting, you've got video editing, you've got all these things that contribute to almost set design in a way, like when we're filming this.
Yep.
So there's all these things that contribute to a podcast, pre-production.
Copywriting on the descriptions and the titles. And Yep.
We do much better when our pre-production's better, but that's effort. There's a bit that goes into that, and it's not, it's not cognitively easy work either. We're racking our brains for stories and content and trying to find the most interesting things to share in the most digestible way. It's not easy, and it's a lot of effort, and people, that's also with an existing brand. We had the brand was already done, like it was already sitting there.
Yep.
So we could just plug into that Buzzsprout, which is the, what would you call it? Like the aggregator of, you put an episode into it and it will push it out to Spotify and Apple Podcasts and all that for you. It was already set up. It was already all done. The website was already there. There's all these things that even with this season, like, we just plugged into, which if you didn't have that, you'd have to do all that.
Yes. So I think to the point that I would say anyone who does it, and you even look at the people who do reach these like huge levels of success, like the Alex Hormozi and Joe Rogan and Lenny's podcast and all these ones, it's between like 3 to 4 to 5 years, like of years of constant, and not just doing stuff, but like, as you said, cognitively, like load of figuring out, pivoting, changing your messaging, do like all these things over and over and over again. So I think if you're going to do it, accept that it does take time and effort, a lot of time and effort. Be in it for the long haul, or frankly, don't bother.
Yeah.
Or again, to the same point, just ask what you want to get out of it. Like, I think getting out of this has been an awesome lesson. We've tried to be like both giving something, but also learning something, I think has been a huge part. And that's why we said we did it in the first place. And then, or to your point before, say if you're a company, I've seen people do it in some of them, these large companies, they do a podcast, but then find out why you're doing it. Same as a product, same as any marketing. Like, what is the purpose of this? Is it to nurture existing? Is it to bring new leads in? Is it to give you credibility? What is the purpose of the podcast you're trying to do? And hopefully make it something that's somewhat achievable, or maybe even horizons. Like, best case, we go viral. Worst case, we send it out to our subscribers as something to listen to, or whatever that looks like. But I think having purpose behind it, because I think doing a podcast for the sake of doing a podcast hoping it goes viral, it's 99.9% you're going to end in pain.
It won't be sustainable.
No.
Because if you don't have objectives in place that don't depend on like outcomes, like, or download numbers and that type of thing, I think that will be very hard to sustain that.
Yeah.
It's we can't expect huge downloads yet. We're getting better. Like we keep getting better and better, and we keep improving. And every episode's an iteration. Every single time we improve stuff.
There's heaps of testing that we talk about constantly, and that I've used now in my practice, like in day-to-day stuff. That like, yeah, even just small tweaks that people may not even notice, but it's like hopefully subconsciously it's making those changes.
Yes. Yeah. Like there's so many things like color schemes on the videos, getting that right, and getting the hook right, and getting the subtitles right, and making sure the brands are appropriately placed, and then how far are the cameras zoomed in, because that affects post-production. And wow, it just keeps, it's a lot of variables. There's a lot of things that need to come together.
Yep.
And we did have a few things that were already in place that we could just bounce off the back of. I had all the equipment already as well. It's just a lot of things that, you need to just, get, just to get it going. And just to get it going.
And if you could go back, whatever it was, six months ago or so.
Yeah.
If you could redo it all over again, how would you approach this in that's a very big question, but like maybe what are the 3 things you do different from the very beginning?
I think we could have done a bit more iterating faster at the beginning.
Okay.
But then part of me says that, well, no, we needed to get a few down just to get a feel for it.
When you say iterating, what do you mean by that?
Iterating in post mainly,
okay,
but a little bit in pre-production. Like we ramped up pre-production over time.
Yep.
After, like from memory, our first few, we kind of just did them.
Yep.
That would be a couple of things. Obviously, format-wise, I'd do less complex.
Okay.
Make sure that it's easy to just consume an episode on its own.
Yep.
We spoke about earlier in this episode about how, we were using hypotheticals and we're trying to build characters over a few episodes, and it was just too complex in the end. In the middle of an already complex thing.
Yep.
I'd say I'd do, use the fonts we're using and use the color scheme we're using now, but we had to kind of go through it to know that, and to put everything together bit by bit. Every episode, there's like 6 or 7 iterations, every single time. Like it's all written. I've got a whole document where I just keep track of what was improved, and even the file type. Like, do you publish an MP4 or do you do MOV, or do you use an MP3? Like all these things that just contribute. And
it's interesting because it's a kind of, again, very meta, but we talk about the stuff of product and go to market, things like that. And I think the same goes, right? There isn't it's not like, oh, hey, what would you like to your point then? It was a very direct question where it was 3 things you'd change. But it's not like, hey, if we just did this thing, we would have got a bunch of new views. And it's like, same as a product, right? There's probably 150 things, individuals that will all contribute to the main thing. And I use the same as product, and the same as this, the analogy of like, what makes a great hotel. And there's probably not one. There's like, comfy beds. Like, no, there's like thousands of things. Like, it's where its location is, the service staff, the pricing, all of it tied together. There's not one thing. And so I think it's the same goes for here. I think and I could imagine if we extrapolated this over 4 years, the amount of iteration, hopefully like more and more and more and more and more, you get to a point where if we're constantly being honest and realistic and going, this part's not working, this thing's shit, or this thing's going well, hopefully eventually you get it right.
Yeah.
And like, as in like get it right to the point where you get enough traction behind it.
Yes. But even adjusting to each other's communication style and how you do it, like that's the other thing that I think that takes a little bit of time. That's just getting used to how someone speaks and, how I speak. And that was something that I think that takes a little bit of time.
Yep.
There's some good compounding with that because you get used to it and then you can kind of work in well. For it. Yeah. So that was... that's been interesting with having just the same person that I've done it with for a long time, because I haven't done that before. It's always a different guest every episode.
Yep.
Previously. So that's been really good, actually. Have you got anything that you would do differently?
Probably back to that. Probably I'd say most of it's pre-production, like you were saying. I would say look at the stories, craft them in ways that anyone can understand, and make it very clear and digestible, and just fundamental copywriting, content stuff. And I would say, I know in the first couple one we scripted a lot of what we did. Like we tried to get very to the point, and I think and there's another really great content creator on LinkedIn that I follow, Justy, and she was saying that how she
Who is it? Sorry,
Justy or Justine. It's I think it's a European name. I can't remember. So, sorry, Justin, if you're listening. But she does this. She talked about how like her emotions affect the content. Mm-hmm. So if she's feeling stressed and worried and nervous or pissed off or whatever it is, the words and the way she says stuff, it comes across in the writing, and people feel it and can see it. And I think the same goes here. If I'm like really enjoying myself on a topic that I really care about, and you know, we're going back and forth, those have been the clips that have done the best. And without any real need to do it, it was pre-production of like, what's something interesting I want to talk about. And when you're in the zone, just have fun and enjoy the crap out of it. And because if you're like something you said before around like, stop focusing on trying to make a good product, focus on giving the audience a good experience. And I think that's important, because then you're like, oh, scripting, I should say this at the right time and maybe mention these 3 things, when the people are going to be like, this is listening to like a PowerPoint presentation. Yes. Whereas like if I'm just having a really interesting, fun talk and trying to highlight things that are both good and bad, it comes across. And that's what I will. If I listen to a podcast, I want to hear that. I don't care about statistics being perfect and the right things being like mentioned. I want to be entertained and engaged.
Yeah. And that's what I heavily scripted early on. Heavily scripted. And we're at the point now where we'll have a couple of talking points per episode. We don't script now. Well, really at all. If there's things I need to remember, if I need to quote someone or something like that, I'll have that written down. But it's more like, here's the stories, here's the topic, we'll base it around, let's do that. So, but it's been interesting. I'll share how we kind of started this, because it was a LinkedIn DM. I just saw some of your content somewhere. And
it was something triggering. I can't remember what it was. But we agreed on.
And I just thought, I'll get along with this guy. So I sent you a DM, and then we chatted a bit, I think, through DM. And then you came and had a beer at WeWork.
Yeah, that's right.
And then I said, do you want to do a podcast? This is the first time I met you. And which might sound strange, but I was like, I think it'll go well. Like, that was enough information for me. So that's been it's been really fun, actually. It's been great to have someone that like I can reflect on things with, which was a big attraction for me, because before I was just doing it and maybe not iterating much, whereas this is, we iterate, like heaps. Things change and things improve, and you can feel yourself getting prouder and prouder of the output. So it's been an awesome experience, actually, for me. It's nice to be able to publicly thank you for doing it and coming on the crazy ride, and like going, like, I'm kind of obsessed. I get obsessed at times with the podcast. So Alex is like, ooh.
I like it.
I've got other things in my life as well.
I like, and vice versa too, mate. This has been awesome. Appreciate it. I know Jack does 80% of the work, 90% of the work, or behind closed doors, a lot of production stuff. So there's no way I could do this. So appreciate bringing it on board. It's been fun, and it's good to bounce ideas. I think it definitely helps with the cognitive bias stuff, or like stuff that I either definitely disagree with or definitely agree with. And then when you voice it out loud, and then you go like, oh, that's full of shit. That's actually wrong, because I was thinking of it like this. And instead of going like, oh, I haven't considered these 5 things, and have the humility to actually listen to the actual feedback. But like, and I think particularly like a creative process, you need that sound wall to go back and forth. So thanks, mate. It's been awesome. So 22 episodes. No, it's been great. And look, definitely emotional benefits as well. Like I, as I said, moving from scripted for maybe the first 10 of this season. And then something clicked in me, and I just threw out the script and just started speaking, naturally, more naturally anyway. And it feels good. That feels good. So it's much easier too. It just flows.
But it's that fear of, I'm going to run out of things to say. And then you do a heap of episodes, and okay, I've got things to say.
There's a lot more here.
But like maybe we'll finish on any emotional benefits for you.
I would say probably the same thing again, right? Like, I think, first couple was a bit like very much watching what I should say and getting nervous and stuttering and not coming out very well, and then hearing back and being like, oh, that was awful. Like I wouldn't listen to me. That's terrible. And then going like, okay, well, you got to have structure. I think it's a balance. You don't just, I personally can't just free will it entirely. but having a structure of points you want to cover and things you want to mark off on, same as doing like a speech or, you know, Toastmasters stuff. It's like you've got to have a narrative you follow and a point to your story, hopefully. But yeah, trying to script it, and you can feel it too, right? Like you've been to places where you know someone's reading off a script. Some of these TED Talks, you're like, I can almost see the writing. Like it's very, very clear. And it becomes disingenuous. And I think, yeah, like emotional things, just trusting what you got to say, say what you mean, it comes across, and be open to people think you're full of shit or not. So yeah, I think it's really good. But both the social media and actual stuff, like hearing comments and seeing people put stuff back, and it's really interesting, like stuff people disagreed with and being like, okay, that's cool. I didn't think about that, and that's a good perspective. Better off me being in an echo chamber, like you were saying. And actually hear people's feedback. So no, it's great, and you do have to just put yourself out there in a way, and you have to explain things that don't have every single caveat covered. And you have to just, because you can't. It's too hard to consume, basically. Yes.
So that's something too. Is it feels like you're opening yourself up to criticism because you're saying something, and you go, oh, but what about this exception, this exception, this exception, this exception? Right. But there's a confidence to being able to go, look, I'm putting out the best message I can with what I know. And look, if you're going to grab onto one of those exceptions or those alternative examples, you know, I can only do what I can do. Yeah,
you're right. And that's a really good point, right? It's like, I think I did that a lot of, if I'm in a consulting session, I try to caveat everything I say, because you don't want to say, oh, this is how you do marketing, because it's not, that's very subjective. But yeah, if you caveat too much, it ruins the narrative. And yeah, to your point, it's like, as long as you stand behind what you say, and knowing that there's an analogy around the, what do you call it, Lord of the Rings. You know, there's like the books that are super complex and very detailed, and if you were to translate that exactly to the movie, it would be a drone and it would be too much. And even they were saying, and I remember there was an interview with Peter Jackson who directed it, and he was saying, I had to cut out really important pieces, but then even with all those missing pieces, and they even went for 4.5 hours, the extended versions, he's like, I had to still make a very good narrative. So I'm missing characters, I'm missing plot points, but even all that aside, can I still tell a good story that goes across? And I was like, and same as any form of content, right?
Yes.
You can't tell them everything, but can you still tell a narrative that gets to the point?
Yes.
So yeah.
Yes, and that happens in this podcast as well. Like I'll go to edit something, and it's like, this is so good, this part of it, but I do have to take it out because it's adding complexity to the narrative now, and the narrative has to come first. It has to be a smooth experience from start to finish, and just remembering that you listening at home won't know what I cut out anyway.
That's right.
I'm not ruining your life. You don't know about it. So I'm not taking something away from you. You just never knew about it.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. That's interesting.
All right, cool. Well,
cool, mate.
Thanks, mate. 22 episodes down. It's been awesome fun. So,
likewise.
And I hope that anyone listening in, if they want an idea of how podcasting works, or they want a bit more detail, feel free to reach out.
Or give any feedback. Put it money where your mouth is. Always hearing what people think. Ideas, feedback, thoughts, good, bad, and ugly.
Yeah. But happy to do some consulting if someone wants help setting it up as well, or maybe improving what they're doing.
Just getting general advice as well.
Yeah, for sure.
Awesome.
But good fun. And 22 episodes, season 3. Thank you all for listening.
Thanks, mate.